Mike, turn your games down.
Hi, everyone. Episode 164 of Games My Mom Found. I am Mike Albertin, and who's an X-Men with me tonight?
Hi, everybody. I am the alternate universe clone who's secretly the twin brother of Scott Summers. This is Jake Terrel. How are we doing, everybody?
And my other guest.
I'm Blair Farrel from comicbookvideogames.com. I can't remember the name of my own website. And I'm here to talk about Super Street X-Men Fight 2 Man X.
Okay. So we are all here to talk about a game that actually means a lot to me. X-Men Mutant Apocalypse for Super Nintendo. It came out in 94. That will never be re-released.
So sad.
Yeah,
It was last year.
It was re-released?
On the arcade 1-up cabinet.
Oh,
You have to pay $800 to play it in Canada, but technically still re-released.
Just drop a small fortune to be able to play this game from 1994.
Okay, I mean, you're not wrong, but I don't consider that being re-released.
It's the Monkey's Paw re-release.
That's a good point.
When I saw those arcade cabinets, I was like, oh, okay, that's awesome. And part of me thought about it. But the only reason I want an arcade cabinet would be to rip out the guts and put a RetroPie in. So I never bought an arcade cabinet.
But I have one in the living room.
I totally want to do that. That'd be great.
I want to. I have the space, but I'm like, I'll never use it other than a couple times. So I'm like, eh.
See, I don't have the space. I made the space.
This is, I think, one of my early X-Men experiences with this game. A friend of mine back in the day had this game, and he would play it sometimes, and I'd watch him, and I always thought it was so cool. And then you had the X-Men cartoon around at the same time in America, so I remember watching that. And I also remember being confused because in this game you had Psylocke, who was not in the X-Men cartoon at all, I don't think, or at least not very much.
She probably had a guest appearance here and there, but she might not have even been named.
I don't remember it. I mean, if she was in it, it wasn't for any long period of time, and probably not till a later season.
I fell off it as a kid before the later seasons.
Well, Mike, you got the chance to subscribe to Disney Plus and catch up on it because the 90s are coming back, y'all. X-Men is coming back stronger, more beautiful, sexier, I might add, than ever before because the X-Men animated series is coming back.
Yeah, I saw that. I don't know how I feel about that.
I mean, It can't get any worse than the very last season of the X-Men animated series. And if it gets little kids excited about the X-Men again, I'm all for it.
Okay, she is in the 90s cartoon somewhere.
Yeah, they did a lot of guest spots, and sometimes someone would just pop in for 5 seconds, and then again not even be named. There's a part where Spider-Man's hand just comes in and webs someone and pulls him away.
That's great.
It was a different time though. It really was. With this game, I mean, I think one thing that's so that always kind of grabbed me, and I don't think I realize as much as I do now when I replay this. You end up having, was it 6 different characters? I think, or no, 5 different characters.
Yes, 5.
Yeah,
and they're not. And the way the game starts, they each have their own mission, and each mission is different. You have your attract screen that's going to tell you, oh, hey, you're going to go. Each mutant is going to go do this and stop this part because you're attacking the island of Genosha, which it wasn't. See, for me, Genosha, I remember in the cartoons where Genosha was this mutant paradise, actually a slave labor camp. But is this?
It was a metaphor for apartheid.
For what?
For apartheid, how it basically was is mutants would be subjugated, kept in prison. I mean, like this game starts and kind of exploited by people. And there was some pretty good comic event. Extinction Agenda is the first one that comes to my mind in the early 90s. And so that's what kind of the story is based off here. They added an apocalypse for some reason as a deviation from the comics, but ostensibly Genosha has always been a kind of apartheid metaphor.
Okay. Is this how Genosha was in the comics too, then I assume, at this time?
Yeah, minus Apocalypse. Yeah, it's pretty much spot on that humans basically would keep and exploit the labor of mutants and would keep them and hold them captive and mutant rights violations. It's pretty messed up. And then throughout the comics in the like later 90s, Magneto basically takes the island of Genosha over and creates a mutant island state that ultimately gets nuked by someone in the early 2000s.
Oh, okay. Isn't Genosha in the current comic still?
No, it's Krakoa.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, Krakoa is what it is now.
Okay, that's something completely different. All right. And I never really pay attention to the story in this game. All the times I played it, I never, the early part where it tells you all about what you're doing, what each mission is, I've never watched any of that. I always just click the button and play. But the fact that you get to pick 5 different mutants to start off, Psylocke, Cyclops, Wolverine, Beast, Gambit, and they all have their own level too, which I thought was just so cool. And for me, I always have to start with Gambit because I like Gambit in this game a lot. I like Gambit a lot. I think he's just a cool
Gambit's
character.
Cool. I like Gambit, but I love the way that the level does. Like, that's what surprised me because I had never played this game before. My first X-Men video game, because I never even had a Super Nintendo, I had a Sega Genesis, so I played X-Men 2, The Clone Wars on Sega Genesis. But what surprised me about this game is it's like Mega Man in a sense that you can kind of pick what level to start and do first. My first one was to do Cyclops because Cyclops is my boy. But I really liked that, the X-Men, they don't play a ton different, but they play pretty different. But the levels are very different and you can choose your own order. And I thought, really, it was so Mega Man in a sense. And then you could, I don't want to say sequence break because you can't, you don't get upgrades or whatever. But no. I just thought it was really, really cool that it gives you some choice in how to approach the game.
Yeah, it's why I kind of use that long description at the beginning because this seems like it's like a homunculus of every single one of Capcom's games at the time because you have the Mega Man character select, do the own order layout, and then the core gameplay is 2 buttons, almost like Final Fight is a beat 'em up. But then all of the X-Men's powers are activated by Street Fighter style button combinations because this would have came out around the same time as the first X-Men Capcom fighting game, Children of the Atom. So it's pretty much just everything packed into one license package.
Which is very interesting. I have never been very good at pulling off the moves for the Street Fighter moves essentially. I would do a couple that I know by heart, like Mortal Kombat stuff that I know is in the game, but not in this game always. But it's cool that it's there. I was very bad at it. I could never get I couldn't get a lot of their mutant abilities off. For Cyclops, I could never get his damn laser off except when he was crouched. I don't know why. It's the only time I could do it.
And you can go through the entire game without doing any of that, but it makes it so much easier because I also love Cyclops in this game because I pretty much use him for everything because you have the first 5 stages and then it's kind of okay, now you have levels where you can pick everyone, but it's interesting because depending on who you have, you can't get to certain power-ups and bonuses. But I always use Cyclops because I just fight everyone out of range and just constantly spam Optic Blast. That's how I beat the Brood Queen and even Apocalypse. It's just okay, I'm just going to keep doing this until he falls down. I can't let him get close.
Yeah, because it's almost like a fighting game type approach, except for the AI in this game. Because it's not really a fighter, so even though you can go at a distance and keep people at range, it's almost game breaking because the AI is not good or smart enough to do what a fighting game would do, which is you jump up and over, slide under, all the things you can do in a fighting game. But this just makes it way more OP, and it makes people like Psylocke or Wolverine, who are much more melee focused, play completely different, and I would argue a little bit harder.
Yeah, it's I never use Beast Beast and Psylocke I didn't use outside of the first levels. Except for I use Beast to kind of beat Omega Red because you can get over when he does the I'm not hitting you unless you get close whip move. You can jump over him with Beast and just bounce on his head until he dies. So I just use that exploit, but that's the only time I ever use Beast. Even I think I used Wolverine in the last level, which is and really interesting how they tackle that. I really like how this game is single player, which is weird for an X-Men game because the X-Men are all about teamwork and you have the arcade and even the Genesis games had 2-player. But the way this kind of approaches it is the start of the game, as Mike brought up, is okay, you're going to Genosha, but if you actually read the story, which is very little, all the missions have context where it's okay, someone's going, Gambit's going to the harbor and Beast is going after the computer and then Cyclops is going after the army. So it's okay, everyone has their own role in how they go about kind of liberating Genosha here.
Which is it's a cool aspect to have that because it gives you motive, and I really did like that. Like with Cyclops, we were talking about, I don't like the way that he walks for some reason, and he just bugged me a lot in this game. Like, I only use him the one time, and I never touch him again. But I also couldn't do Optic Blast very often, so that made him not fun at all to play as.
Like, Cyclops in this game, and so something that we haven't really stated, like, the character models, and, like, all of this is based on the very, like, blue team, gold team, 90s X-Men that you envision when you think about the X-Men. And so, like, Cyclops in this time, when you mention about, like, the way he walks, like, that was just very much Cyclops of the time. The Boy Scout, like, he has a giant stick up his ass and is just, like, just too prim and proper or whatever. Like, the Boy Scout is the way I would describe him. But Cyclops is so much cooler than that. But this is the very 90s, extreme, too cool. Like, you would find this in a Pizza Hut in the 90s. And that's just what you got to keep in mind tonally about viewing these characters.
And the sprites are huge as well. Like, they take up a lot of real estate.
And they're colorful.
Good. Yeah.
I loved that because
me too.
So much of what I would consider these kind of like Streets of Rage or, the side-scrolling beat-em-ups is some of them are kind of darker. I mean, and that's less so these days. You got stuff like River City Girls, which is super colorful. But the sprites in this game are so colorful and vibrant. And yeah, this Wolverine, I think, is probably the most guilty of like being a hulking behemoth. And like Wolverine's supposed to be like 5'4", but the dude's built like a Mack truck. But I love the way the sprites are designed. It's just got so much character to it.
And Wolverine does have a really cool level too, where he goes like to a Sentinel factory, and then you have to like climb up things because that's his, one of his special abilities. He can climb because he's Wolverine and got claws. And I really like that. Like I like how they did a good job of kind of like making all the characters feel completely different and having their first levels that are very geared towards them. Like climbing around as Wolverine, you're going through the Sentinel factory. Like it was all very cool. And you have a very cool boss too, which is a giant Sentinel in production. And I think you can climb up a spine of a Sentinel in this level too at one point.
Yeah.
I thought that was so fitting for Wolverine because, I mean, that level starts off with him climbing through the sewers, which is so fitting for Wolverine because one of his obviously the most famous X-Men story is the Dark Phoenix saga. But there's a portion of that story where he invades the Hellfire Club and climbs through the sewers and works his way up. So I felt that was like, in my opinion, I feel like the people who made this game had a lot of love for the source material. And so, I mean, that's obviously not a huge thing, but I was just like climbing through the sewers as Wolverine. I'm like, hey, I know this kind of vibe.
Okay. I did not get that, but I've never read any of the Claremont really, so I'm uneducated in that, unfortunately. I don't know, it's just fun, like, and I think you can get to break things. I mean, the enemies in this game, at least for most of this game, are pretty simple. They're just grunts that you fight, but it wasn't a bad thing. Like, I mean, also one of Wolverine's abilities is you can like lunge forward into like a claw attack. That's the only one I knew how to pull off, so I just did that constantly. So I wasn't able to get most of his moves.
Well, yeah. I mean, Wolverine is just, I think he has like an uppercut style move, but like, yeah, it's just like 4 forward attack because this game has 2 buttons, like B is jump, Y is attack. And that's something that I've always thought about, like, because like there's so many buttons on the Super Nintendo controller that are unused here. So you could have easily had like Gambit's like throw cards is like X, and same thing with Cyclops, but then you'd almost need to put like a cooldown meter or something where it's just like, or another energy meter where it's you can't use this because like you would be able to break it even more than what you already can. So I kind of like how like you have the fighting game moves, so there's some skill involved, so you have to like kind of learn how to do that better. But then again, like if you don't want to, I mean, it's going to be really hard if you don't know how to do it, especially in the later levels. Like I don't know how you would get past like the later levels, and even like the Gambit level, like you're fighting a boss and it's like a helicopter, and you have to throw your cards upwards.
Yeah.
This is very much an instruction manual game. Like if you don't have the instruction manual, then like when you rented it out back in like '94, like you'd be handicapped.
I figured out the one with Gambit, like that was one that I was just doing Mortal Kombat moves. Like I think it's forward punch, where he'll throw the card, and that's how I figured that out. The same thing up is up, punch and throws the card, and I'm like, okay. So I had no problem with that one, but yeah, I can see what you mean though. Like that would have been difficult. I think you can jump and hit the turrets for that boss fight, but I can't remember.
I mean, you must be able to, because if you couldn't figure it out, like you would have to have some way to do it, because you would get to that and be like, what? I'm just stuck now?
Just done.
I mean, and two, while it is complicated, something that I think this game benefits from is doing a lot of what a lot of other games did. I think Blair said that this is a lot like a best of Capcom type game. Because like even stuff like, and it just comes to my mind is like when you play as Beast, like it's like if you can play Blanca from fucking Street Fighter, you can basically play Beast and you can just kind of pick it up.
I didn't think about that, but yeah, I mean, it's cool that the moves are there because I mean, you don't have a lot of beat 'em ups in this era that would have let you do combo moves. I mean, Final Fight 3 did, but this and Final Fight 3 are the only ones I can think of that had that type of mechanic.
Streets of Rage 2, maybe? People are smarter about Streets of Rage 2 than what I am, because I only came to it later, and people are way better at it than what I am. But I think that had something like that in there, too.
Never played Streets of Rage.
You should get that on the show.
Yeah, I grew up on that game. I was really bad at it. Don't think I made it very far at all, but I have a lot of fondness for those games.
I've only played the first one. I never played 2 or 3. I don't really have a thing for beat 'em ups anymore now that I'm older, unless I'm with like an old friend, then I can play them. Other than that, I have no real interest in them. This is one of the few that I just every so often I like to play this game again because it's X-Men, so it's a little different. I'm not just generic, tough guys. I'm the X-Men, and I think that's also something that's so like amazing to me about this game, especially in the 90s, was because I got to be some of my favorite characters. I know as a kid I only played this as Wolverine when I got the option to, because I don't know why. Because Wolverine was the coolest, I guess.
Because every 12-year-old boy thinks Wolverine is the best. It's a rite of passage.
Yeah.
I do want to talk about, like, in Cyclops level, you have a boss where you just got to blow up a train, which really isn't a boss fight. And then in Gambit, you have at the end of it, you have to jump into, you blow these turrets that we were talking about off a helicopter, and you jump inside a helicopter and kill a pilot. And that's it. Like, I like that these stages didn't have bosses because the rest of the game is full of mini bosses and bosses. So it was a nice that you had a couple levels that were kind of quieter. I mean, Cyclops does have guys on bikes that you have to shoot with the optic blast that come flying in that annoy the hell out of me, but it was fine.
Yeah, I think that's something the first set of levels does really well. Is it teaches you like it lets you run around as these characters without the worry of a boss fight as like difficulty like wall or something, and you're just able to kind of explore these levels, see how the characters play, and then once you get past that, then you're actually challenged by the bosses.
I also really loved Gambit's like roll that he does in this game. I kept pulling it off all the time. I don't know if it's like forward something, but there's somewhere where he would like roll attack, and I just loved it. It was just my favorite move to use.
I just loved the card projectiles. Like one, it like splits into 3, and it's just really effective, like having a spread of stuff. But I like his level. I think is probably my favorite, just because it feels so very Gambit, like you're pulling off a heist. He's all about the Thieves Guild kind of stuff in the comics, and it's just. I don't know. It felt very authentic to his character, even though you're on this island and doing all this military stuff.
And like outside of Wolverine too, it's that there's a lot of cool vertical like platforming as well, and like time jumps, which kind of break up the moment-to-moment like beat 'em up action.
And that's what games like this need. Is you got to have stuff to break up that kind of smash A gameplay.
Yeah, I feel like Gambit isn't even in that many games in general.
He was in like all the X-Men games of the 90s.
Oh, okay,
I mean, he was in X-Men Destiny too for a little bit when we did that game.
I didn't do my homework, but I started writing like an X-Men book that I never really did anything with, and I actually wrote an appendix of who is in what game. And I'm like, Gambit's in more than what you realize. Like Spider-Man and the X-Men, for example. Where like Gambit, like he can't use a stick. Like once you run out of cards, you're pretty much dead.
I hate that game so much. That was one of the games that I was so excited to rent, and just to this day, I have tried to play it with like save states and cheats, and I fucking hate that game. I hate Spider-Man and the X-Men so much. It's a terrible game. But that's another episode. I do want to cover it though, just because it's terrible.
Because you hate yourself.
I want to beat it one day, whether I cheat or not. I want to finish that game. But also with like X-Men Mutant Apocalypse, like another character we haven't really mentioned yet too much is Psylocke. I think Psylocke for me, she was a character I had no idea who she was, and I was too young to care about women at this time exactly. So I was like, okay, I don't care as a female character. I don't want to play as her. I remember that. I remember that being a thing, a thing at the time. But she has a really cool level too. Like, I mean, she has a mini boss, which is some kind of mech. You have a part where the floor is falling. You got to keep running. And then you fight. She ends her level by fighting a Sentinel, but she's just a really cool character in this game. Like she has, I think, some great range moves with uppercuts and things. And she was also a character I knew nothing about at this time because I never saw the animated cartoon episode where she's in it because I was probably off by then. I only watched the first 2 volumes or so, then I fall off just because I don't know. I just didn't keep watching it at the time. And I also own the first 2 volumes of the cartoon, and I watched those, and she's not in there, so she's later. So she meant nothing to me. Like I just didn't like her character as a kid. Now I think she's a badass in this game because she has a lot of different abilities. She has a lot of not range, but a lot of like powerful moves that you can use, and like the uppercuts and the combos where she doesn't use her Psylocke sword though, which upset me. But she does a fist thing where she charges it with energy and hits them.
I mean, that is what her powers are. It's the psychic dagger. The what's it called? Claremont would write. It's the psychic totality of her power. I forgot how he would phrase it, but it's that is what her, like, it's a psychic like dagger. It's not an actual like sword like in the Olivia Munn classic X-Men Apocalypse from a few years ago.
Never seen it. Still
not as bad as a lot of people make it out to be. Still not a good movie. It's just messy. But I love Psylocke. And again, around the comics of the time, like, she's very much front and center. She's a character with a ton of baggage. But I do like Psylocke as a character. Betsy Braddock is like really, really great as a character. But like the comics are just, she's very much like on the main team now. And it's a very new thing. And she was also in the X-Men 2 Clone Wars game I mentioned earlier on the Sega Genesis. So it's like, she's very, very popular, and I'm glad she's included here. I wish we had more female characters. Like, I'm sad that, like, it's not spoilers, you're listening to a podcast about this game, but like at the end you rescue all the characters, like, and then you get all these great female characters, and I'm like, I want to play as Storm. Let me play as all these great other characters that exist.
You get to play as Storm and Spider-Man and the X-Men and swim around.
We'll save that for a future episode that I get to experience this apparently terrible game.
Oh, you never played it then? Yeah,
I've never played it.
You fire lightning underwater, and it just makes me think of Magneto in the first X-Men, where it's like, oh yes, launch a lightning bolt into a giant copper conductor. I thought you lived in a school.
I love that.
Well, it's like Psylocke too. She was in X-Men Children of the Atom, which would have came out
before
alongside this, and she was so popular in that when they did Marvel Superheroes, which brought in like Spider-Man, Iron Man, Hulk, like they brought Psylocke over to that game because she was so big in Children of the Atom too.
That's cool. The only time I ever got to know Psylocke as a character and liked her a lot was Uncanny X-Force in the comics. That first run was like, that is probably her best storyline, just in general. I mean, that run by Rick Remender is absolutely incredible. And if you want to know more about that character, definitely pick that up. I actually have the first couple issues. I have a few. I was trying to collect that run. It didn't happen, but I bought a bunch of issues of it. Then I started buying Uncanny X-Force Volume 2 and 3 by accident because I couldn't tell the difference at first. I'm like, okay, screw this. But it made me really care for that character a lot. Like, I had no interest in her really whatsoever other than she was in this game and I knew who she was. But after reading that comic, I'm like, okay, she's awesome. Yeah,
because like so much in the 90s, she's presented as just like she's the hot ninja and like not really given much more depth. And so, at least when growing up, you look at that and you never really think about her more. But like if you go back to the runs like from the 80s with Claremont and the more modern stuff, she was there's so much baggage with that character, and she's got so much more to her than just being the hot ninja that Jim Lee liked to draw in the 90s that it really makes that character way, way more worth it.
Yeah, I mean, they did like the Marvel swimsuit issues, and you had like Rogue and Psylocke and stuff like that.
To be fair, you also had like Colossus in a banana hammock, so it was like it was like beefcakey for both genders. But yeah, what I will say is that she's like very, very sexualized as of most female characters in the 90s,
and she's in this game too.
Yeah.
And then the only other character we haven't talked about yet from the base is you get Beast, which I do not like Beast in this game at all. I don't like the way he plays. I don't like how he moves. I don't like that he jumps on the ceiling. That's part of his gimmick. I don't like any of it with him.
I don't like Beast at all as a character, period. I did like his level in the sense that you could climb on the ceiling. I thought that was neat.
The way that level's built around his moves, like the first mini boss that you fight, like there's just like these. Like, I think Psylocke and Beast, they have, like, these kind of mech mini-boss. Actually, Wolverine has one, too. But the way they have in Beast level is that you're kind of just, like, hanging on things and, like, hitting it and then kind of moving up and down because it can kind of match your like verticality. And then like after that, there's like a lot of cool platforming bits as you can like latch on to stuff and kind of like find secret 1-up tokens because there's like 3 like X cards in every level. And if you get them, you get a spare life because something that's punishing in this game is that you have every character has 2 lives starting out. You can't earn more. But in like the first opening salvo, you have to beat 1 level with every character. But if you lose both lives with a character, then it's game over and you have to start over.
Oh.
But like Beast fights a bunch of Sentinels at the end, but he has a move where you can like bounce on heads, and it's pretty crazy that you can just like mow them down with like little to no challenge at all. Because they can't hit you; they just like bounce on the head.
I mean, you get more actually. Also, there's no checkpoints in these levels too. I mean, they're not super long, but as a guy who plays more modern, I mean, I play a lot of retro games, but I cheat a lot. I'm used to games with checkpoints when I do play modern games, and there are no checkpoints in these levels.
There is a password system though, which was common at the time. And what I mean, like this is clearly, it feels like a port of an arcade game because it does have that like toned up difficulty. Like you're not meant to play through all of this. Like it is meant to be harder, like a lot of the games at the time. But you do unlock like passwords, and it's like pictures of various X-Men that I guess you can input, and it takes you to the later stages.
I mean, that was the era though with passwords. I didn't like it. I didn't have checkpoints. That kind of bothered
I completely
me
agree. Yeah,
a lot. I don't know. Beast just didn't. Also with Beast, I don't like him in this. I don't think I'm a big fan of the character in general though either.
I thought it was really funny how, because I mean, we talked like one of the best things is the verticality and the upside downness of his level. But can we talk about how, because when he climbs on the ceiling, like in the comics and whatever in the movies, shout out to Kelsey Grammer. Like, he climbs on the ceiling, and he's got his claws dug into the ceiling, like, but the sprite in the game is clearly just, like, they took it, flipped it 180 degrees, and just stuck his feet on the ceiling, and he just walks like normal.
Yes.
I wish they would have done that a little bit different, but whatever. This was 1994. I'm not going to, like, backseat game design.
Yeah, it's like smart user resources, like, why put in extra work when you don't have to?
Yeah.
I mean, they're already spending enough money on the license, I'm sure, so.
Yeah, well, probably not back then, because I've spoken to people like one of the creators of Spider-Man and on the PlayStation, and Marvel was very hands-off, and this was this wasn't quite the bankruptcy era.
I was going to say, they were going
a few years after, but I mean, Capcom had that license from 1994 or 93 all the way up until 2003, I think, because that's when Marvel vs. Capcom 2 came out, and when they lost it, and that's when the movies would have started kicking off.
And too, like they didn't need to put a ton of effort to make it good, because at this time, anything involving the X-Men was basically a license to print money. Like X-Men #1 in 91 is like still the highest selling comic of all time. Like they don't need this to be good. It just needs to be good enough. And what I will say is I think this game is good enough. There are, it's not a perfect game by any means, but I mean, this is not a bad game for its time. It's still totally worth playing.
Yeah,
it's still fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's fairer, as I know, in this era, I only had a Super Nintendo. Like, I only got to play a Genesis when my parents went into the city, and I played Sonic 2 at a kiosk in a Walmart. But I remember seeing the commercials for X-Men on Genesis and just being so angry that I couldn't play that game. And now going back and playing that game, I'm like, okay, no, I was spared, because that game is X-Men 2 is really good, but I'm glad you're good with save states, because you're going to need to get through Clone Wars.
So true.
Yeah, you're going to need 100 lives cheat, and you're going to need save states. And X-Men 1 is brutal, and I think it was because what's interesting about X-Men on Genesis, and I won't get too off topic, is that Bruce Straley, who went on to work for Naughty Dog, worked on that game. And I think he made a comment on Twitter once, and he was like, whatever I was doing in this game, it doesn't make sense. So, I'm glad I got to have this one kind of, well, other than Spider-Man, the X-Men, but as a pure X-Men game, I'm glad I got this experience, which was tough but fair, as opposed to just brutally hard.
Yeah.
So, and then after you finish the first 5 missions is when you get into the missions where you can choose any character you want. From what I do understand from back in the day, if you lose your lives as a character, after this point, that character just locked the rest of the game until you start over, which is also, I thought, kind of cool.
There's icons in the Magneto levels, Spoilers, Magneto's in this. It's in the 90s. Where there's like an extra live token where it cycles through everyone, so you can get them then. But like, I don't think they're there until like the last level.
Okay, and the first level that you get after this is freaking miserable. The brood level where you go to like a jungle camp and they have the broods here. I was
just pleased to see the broods. I was like, what a good pull. I was not expecting to see the freaking brood in this video game, but I was just happy to see them. But yeah, I found like most of the levels in the latter half to be pretty miserable.
I mean, it's just really hard. Like the broods are always flying around and they hit you in annoying ways, and they're in your way and they're above you and they're hard to hit. I just did not like. I did not like them in this. I unfortunately don't know enough about them. We talked about this a long time ago, but at some point I need to read that brood arc.
I mean, when you look at them, what do you think they are?
Aliens?
They're xenomorphs. And
yeah, I mean, yeah.
And like what I didn't like, because I actually, because I found the Brood Queen, because I just use Cyclops and jump in the air and just shoot her with optic blast, and it's kind of a joke. But this time, because I play this every now and then, because I still have my copy, or I have a copy rather. Like, I was having a lot of trouble with this level because like the brood kind of grab you, like the brood spawn, like the tiny ones. And, like, they just do this thing where, like, they stun you for a long time, and you're just, like, mashing the buttons, just, like, trying to escape. But, like, you just have to wait for this, like, tedious animation to show up. And the way they kind of come at you, it's, like, really hard to, like, line up your hits with them.
And they're infinite. They don't stop spawning.
Yeah.
Which is annoying. I mean, I get it, but they're just... And the Queen Brood fight, that was a fight that, like, just irritated the hell out of me. Because I think I did this as... Wolverine. And I did not realize until I was watching a video after, because the Brood is a giant sprite on the right side of the screen with a giant claw that's sticking out that has a hitbox that never goes away. And if you're playing this if you don't use Optic Blast because you don't know how, and you're not using Cyclops, every time you jump up and try to hit the Brood with Wolverine, you're going to hit that claw, and if you don't aim it just right, you're going to get hit. And you don't do very much damage either. Like, I just watched a video where Cyclops, he did just that. He just jumped up, shot him, and shot him, and that was the end of the Brood Queen pretty quickly.
Yeah, I played that level as Gambit, and that made it way, way better because of the triple shot arc, like, is wide enough to catch some of the other boys and still hit the claw and stuff.
Oh.
It made that level a whole lot easier, but I didn't like that level. It kind of, and this is a weird comparison, but it reminded me of the DLC for Dark Souls 3, where...
That's a weird comparison.
Because Dark Souls is much slower than like a Bloodborne kind of thing. So it's just a different kind of game. But the DLC for that game, like some of the bosses and some of the mobs move like they're in Bloodborne, and you feel like you're moving in molasses. And that's what the Brood levels felt like. That the little Brood Grungalungas running around were so much faster and harder to compensate. And I felt like I was moving in molasses, that it just like really makes that level really unfun. When the Brood should be really, like, the Brood are cool. Like, I like the environment. I like the boss ostensibly, but it's just, I didn't like playing it. And a game should never make you feel bad for just playing it.
It was just, you can also break off that claw, which I didn't know that she has, that the unending hitbox. You can break it and makes the fight a lot easier. You're playing a close range character.
I didn't know that.
And that's, like, hard to do when you're designing, essentially, because, like, I use Cyclops, and there's something that's kind of cool about this level is that if you can get far enough, it's pretty easy to get the 3X cards, so you can get an extra life. So if you die, you're kind of at a zero-sum game, where it's like you don't really lose life or game one. But like if you use Wolverine, like there's certain things that you can get to that you can't get with Cyclops, and that's what I like about kind of like the later levels. And like how hard that must be when you're designing a boss where like not only it has to be designed so you can hit it with projectiles, but also if you have a projectile character and don't know you can do that. So like Wolverine, Beast, or literally anyone, just like as like a standard brawler boss.
Yeah, and that's almost Mega Man-y in a way. One, I do want to compare Wolverine, like exploring levels, as much like Knuckles in like Sonic and Knuckles. You can just like climb up walls and stuff. That was really cool. But like it was Mega Man-y with the bosses because you some characters are better suited for some bosses, and it kind of felt like Mega Man, where like if you sequence break and get some upgrade sooner, it makes other bosses much, much easier. And I like that design. I thought it was really cool. I mean, it adds more replay value so that if you want to, fight some of the bosses with other characters, that you have that option.
then it's just a cool. It is a cool level, much as I did not enjoy it. But the second level makes no sense to me in this area where you go. It's a very short level where you really just a boss fight where you fight Tusk. I don't know who the hell Tusk is to this day still.
Mike, don't feel bad. I don't know who Tusk is.
Yeah,
okay, I have like every issue of X-Men ever. I don't know who Tusk is.
He was on a few episodes of the cartoon. I remember like a friend of mine, his kid brother had the Tusk action figure. And
I did too.
Was like I think the little Tusk used to come out of his back.
Yes.
Like that was really cool. Like that's as much as what I knew. And it just like, for me, again, I just took Cyclops in and he was on the other side. I just kept shooting them so he couldn't get close and then he died.
I just don't understand what made them choose this character as a boss fight for you. Like, I mean, I had his toy as a kid because I had a ton of X-Men toys. Even though I had no idea who the character were, I didn't care. I just loved X-Men. And like, the only way I knew him was this figure. And then this game, and I was just curious. Like, I still don't. And I've covered more X-Men stuff since then. Like, I've tried to read some comics, but I still So okay, I don't feel. I'm glad to know that he just doesn't really exist too much.
Yeah, like I pulled up his wiki, and it sounds familiar. Like it looks like he had been part of a story from the 90s that involved Apocalypse. I'm guessing that would be the one with Strife. It's escaping my brain right now.
Executioner's Song.
Yes, Executioner's Song. He's part of the. It says Tusk is part of the Dark Riders. It looks like he's an Inhuman, which all right. So I don't know. I don't know who this person is. I feel like I should, but it seems like the minute anything involving Tusks enters my brain, it will immediately evacuate my brain.
It just looks like it's Capcom and they're just like giving the X-Men Bible and they're flicking through it and they're like, oh, that thing looks really cool. Like Shuma Gorath is in like Marvel Superheroes. And like, you have so many characters for that game that you can pick from, and it's like, oh yeah, but I want the tentacle eyeball thing. Like, why? Like, because it looks cool, and that's what I want.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, he's a character that doesn't really I don't understand why they had him, but he's here.
He's like a big brawly dude. I can see why they would want him, but it's just he's not. There's so many other really good character pulls like the Brood and Exodus. I thought was a really cool pull from later that Tusk would not even have registered. Like there's so many better Marvel villains and better Marvel X-Men specific characters that Tusk would never have registered to even put in this damn game.
Yeah, it's just weird to me why he was in here because I never knew who he was, and to this day I still I just don't know him, and I'm just like, okay, other than his toy, I had his figure. That's all I knew about him.
Yeah.
I don't know where the figure is anymore, but I'm pretty sure it's in the box at my parents' house. And then I like the next level a lot. I think the next, this is kind of when you're finishing Genosha, and you go through, I think you get chased by lava at one point in this level too.
I hated this level.
So how did you do it? Because okay, whenever I do this level, I can only use Cyclops because if you shoot the optic blast, it kind of knocks down all of the columns of rock at once. So what character did you use going into this?
I did it as Cyclops too, because I also found it the only way I could get it done.
Wolverine. I did the dash attack where he dashes forward, and that will knock out those blocks pretty quickly.
I could see that.
I just really like Wolverine in this game because, or I use Gambit. I can't remember. Either Wolverine or Gambit I used for this level. Might have been Gambit, actually. And Gambit's the same way where you do that, where he does that twirl, that breaks him too really good. So I think I used Gambit for this. Never mind what I was saying. But yeah, you can break them pretty quickly.
I don't like level designs in games that have the wall of instant death. Mario will have that too, and tons of games of this era kind of have that. Super Meat Boy has it. I just personally don't like it, mostly because it reminds me of a timed mission, and I don't like timed missions in games. And I don't know, it's extra punishing in a game where, especially with this one, where the movement's it's not exactly super tight controls because it's a game made in 1994, and I really didn't want to battle with a wall of lava.
Yeah, it doesn't. It's just there for some reason. But I do got to say, I love the sprite of Apocalypse in this game. I think his sprite work that they did the sprite's bigger than you are. He just looks badass. He does the drill arm. He does the spikes on his shoulders. I've also I'm a huge fan of Apocalypse. At least back in the day I was.
I want Marvel, because when they inevitably in the MCU in the year 2045, when all of the characters are dead and they're still pumping out movies, that when they do something with Apocalypse, this is what Apocalypse should be like. He should be super imposing, a little bit cartoonish, like a megalomaniac. Because what they did in the movie from a few years ago, he's like very quiet and subdued, and it was a bummer. But this is exactly what Apocalypse should be like. I thought this was a perfect interpretation. You're spot on about the sprite work. It's a perfect boss fight for a game that really I don't know why Apocalypse is here, but God, I loved it. I thought it was great.
I think he was like the toughest boss in the entire game, like because I basically have to get him in a certain position, and like I can't let him get close. I'm just like constantly spamming optic blast. So,
I had to do that too.
Because if he gets his drill on you, he just like annihilates your health.
Yeah, and I was like one hit from death when I like downed him. It was a close one.
I've always liked Apocalypse. I tried reading the original X Factor stuff that he's in, but I couldn't get anywhere.
God, it's just a totally different vibe, different character.
Oh, it's tough.
Yeah, it's bad. I don't want to say it's bad. It's for like when you read those old comics from the 70s and 80s, like you really do have to keep in mind that it was a very different type of comic back then. And even when Apocalypse was first introduced in X Factor, like they didn't know. Like when he was first introduced, he was supposed to be the Owl, and then later on, when the Archangel stuff happens, that's when he actually became Apocalypse as we know and love him. But I mean, now there are tons of good character like. With Apocalypse now, like there's some good character work there, and really, if you want to get into the X-Men and learn more about kind of Apocalypse Now, if you want to learn about Apocalypse Now, shout out to that movie. You should read like House of X, Powers of 10, because Apocalypse is such a good character these days. Mike, are you there?
Apparently, I muted myself at some point. I don't know how, but it muted me apparently. Okay. What I was saying is, I have always liked Apocalypse. Like, I liked him in the cartoon. I mean, even though he's really campy in that cartoon, and he's not like, it's probably not a very good like description of him, like the way they do it in that cartoon. But that was where I was introduced to him, and I just thought he's such a cool character. I think isn't he a shapeshifter too in the cartoon?
Yeah, he can like change his atoms and stuff. His powers are kind of ambiguous. He's whatever the plot needs him to be is what he is. Okay. But I mean, I was first introduced to him by the cartoon as well, and I thought back then he was awesome because he's super big and super imposing, and that's exactly what Apocalypse should be. But we just haven't seen that in the movies yet.
We're not going to, I don't think, anytime soon. I mean, okay, I do think the X-Men are coming in the MCU. I think it's coming a lot sooner than we think. I don't
know how they're going to do it at this point. Like, where have they been this whole time? Like,
I'm guessing they're going to go in the multi-dimensional idea.
Yeah, I think the way it would have to be done is alternate universe stuff, which
because
I guess is fine. I just want good X-Men movies.
I mean, unless you do something with like, Wanda where mutants exist and all of a sudden there's mutants. I mean,
I don't know. I don't want them to be created by some like MacGuffin of the Scarlet Witch. I mean, I thought that's what they were going to do, but I'm glad they haven't done it yet. I mean, I don't know yet, but it's gonna. I don't want them to be created that way, because the whole point of mutants and why that metaphor is so good is that like it's a natural evolution that they've been, like mutants have been around all this time, and to have them be created by some MacGuffin like that basically makes them into the Inhumans, and it just, I don't know, it weakens the metaphor in a way that I hope they don't approach it, because I think the X-Men metaphor is something that's important and something that really is like core and central to the whole fucking story of the X-Men, is that they try and save a world that hates and fears them. That's the whole tagline.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it seems like we're going to have our first taste if you watch the trailer for Doctor Strange.
I don't know anything. I've not watched any trailers for anything. I like to go into these things blind. I've still not even seen the Spider-Man movies because I don't really like Tom Holland all that much. I need to catch up. I need to watch them. I'm excited if they're going to start introducing X-Men stuff. I very much want it.
You haven't seen No Way. You haven't seen No Way Home, and you haven't been spoiled in No Way Home?
Oh no, I've been spoiled by No Way Home. But like, I don't like Tom Holland very much, and I don't want to watch. Like, this is the problem if you've like dipped out of the MCU, is that I have to watch like 9 movies and like 4 TV shows, all just to like catch up.
Not really.
I just don't want to do it.
If you're only interested in certain characters, you can skip certain things. like certain shows.
I disagree. I disagree because if you're gonna watch Doctor Strange 2, Wanda's gonna be in that, right? So you got to watch WandaVision, which means you gotta watch Endgame and Infinity War, which means you got to watch a bunch of other stuff.
You should watch those two anyway. But how far behind are you?
I have gone back and rewatched them fairly recently, but still,
you don't need to see Spider-Man Far From Home. Just see Spider-Man Homecoming and see Spider-Man No Way Home, and you can skip Far From Home. That movie is garbage. What
I want, and this is just a disagreement I have, and this is super off topic, but this is the last I'll say about it, is like about the way Disney has handled like the Marvel movies and Star Wars in particular, is that what I want is good individual stories that are like pretty disconnected. Like Shang-Chi is probably my favorite MCU movie like right now because it's fairly disconnected. There are some connections which are fine, but like it's a strong story on its own. And how they've kind of handled everything is they plan these stories out in the big picture, but the individual stories that they tell are weaker because they're trying to paint this big tapestry, and it weakens the individual story, in my opinion.
And it's even worse in a post-Peacemaker world.
I've still not even watched that show.
I didn't watch any of it, but I know what you're talking about.
I made it through half of the Suicide Squad, thought the movie was bad, and stopped watching.
I saw it, and I was like, this is fine, but Peacemaker, I keep saying that because I guess we did a Metal Gear show a couple weeks ago. But Peacemaker is one of the greatest shows I've ever seen in my entire life.
John Cena as Solid Snake.
But John Cena, well, yeah, it's like getting off topic. Man, you show that guy is a force in that show.
I need to watch it now. Like I wasn't that interested in it because I just didn't give a shit. Because I mean, I did enjoy the Suicide Squad, but I just didn't care. And people keep talking about it. I'm like, okay. And then I saw the cameo thing that you're mentioning at the very end, and I'm like, okay, maybe I should just watch this for the hell of it. And I have HBO Max, so why not? Oh, and back to X-Men Mutant Apocalypse. One thing.
Speaking of John Cena, let's talk about this game from 1994.
I liked it that you have two levels here, which are just danger room levels to prepare you for attacking Asteroid M. I think it's Asteroid M, right? Or is there something else in this?
No, it's
Asteroid M. Yeah.
And the first fight you do is you fight Omega Red, a character that I don't think. I mean, I know he was in the X-Men cartoon. There's a really good episode with him, and I remember that. Or maybe it was good back when I was a kid, but I liked it that he was included in this game. I just didn't understand why exactly, but it's cool that he's there. Was he a big villain at this time in the comics, or known?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
He's in Children of the Atom. He's in the roster of Children of the Atom. He's in MVC too.
Okay. I vaguely remembered him. I mean, I know he's a Russian, he's a Russian weapon essentially, right? Like he's what happened.
Shout out to his powers. His powers, and this is canonical, is a mutant death factor. It's just so 90s and extreme. He's a personification of all the what we look back now as silly, campy, dumb 90s comic stuff. I have fondness in as much as I like the way that it's introduced with it being a danger room level. I'm glad the danger room is a thing in this game because it's very, very center to what X-Men is about. And the fact that they pulled, Omega Red and Exodus as a part of that, I was very on board with.
And the fact that when you're fighting Omega Red and Juggernaut, who's the second boss, the background just change too.
Yeah.
It will just change during the fight, which I thought was a nice touch.
Okay, and that sprite for Juggernaut, because I've never played Children of the Atom, so I wouldn't have known of it at this time. I know what it is now, and I've seen the sprite. But this sprite to me, when I first saw it, I was like, man, this is Juggernaut. This is so cool. I still am a big fan of this character. I haven't read any comics or anything, and I just like the way he looks. And I remember as a kid, I had his figure. I had two figures of him. I had the one from the X-Men line with Apocalypse, Archangel, and the first one, and then it was a Toy Biz, and I had another one later on where he was just a massive figure, but I lost his helmet. I remember always being upset about that. It was something where he could light up or something. I just remember being a super cool figure. I love Juggernaut. He's awesome to me in this.
Yeah, Juggernaut's good. He much like the Sentinel stuff is if you use Beast, which I did when playing this one. It just makes it so easy. You just jump on his head and he's dead.
Oh, I never thought about doing that. I did that for Omega Red because I was using Cyclops at first, but it wasn't having much luck. And I was like, I'm pretty sure this is what I normally did. And then I tried Wolverine, and with Omega Red 2, it's like when he grabs you with his tentacles, he'll suck away your health and he'll get power back. But that's when I was like, well, maybe I'll try Beast. And I just could leap over because Omega Red just kind of stands there and just waves his hand as if he's a kid. He's like, I'm going to start punching. And if you get in the way, it's your own fault. But I used Beast, so I just kind of jump over that and just bounce on his head and kind of took him down like a chump.
And then I really hate the next level. I mean, it's only one level depending, but I don't know if you guys noticed this. I did, just because I killed off one. I died and then I redid as a different character. That the levels actually, so Asteroid M is a little bit different depending on which character you pick. It changes.
Interesting.
Each one has a different little level with a different little mini boss at the end to get to Magneto. So if you play as one character and say, okay, I want to play as someone else, it won't take you back to Magneto. It'll make you do a different level. And I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, what is interesting too is like if you get Exodus to half power and then do someone else, that when you reach him with the second character, half of his life will be gone.
You can kill him.
That's a good touch.
Also, Exodus, I had no idea who this character was back when I played this game the first time, and then I played this game this time. I still have no idea who this character is.
He's like, it's like his mutant power is being a prick. He's just like from the 90s. He's very 90s. He was like all in the comics around the 90s and as an acolyte of Magneto around this time. Because like, I mean, around the comics with Exodus and what Magneto's doing, he kind of starts like a space cult. I don't know. It gets a little weird, but I like him as a character, but Exodus is like, again, one of those characters that is definitively 90s and is dated to the 90s. There's no modern story that makes him a good character. He just is the 90s.
Does he still show up in comics?
Yeah. So he is, spoilers, I guess, for modern X-Men stuff so there's Krakoa, the island, and they have a council full of important mutants. And so, Xavier, Magneto are on there and Storm, Jean Grey, all those characters you would expect. But the villains also, well, I guess, quote, villains have a seat at the table as well. Mr. Sinister, Magneto's there, Exodus is also there. And so, I mean, Exodus is still not he's present. It's not like there's a book that really explores Exodus as a character, though. But he is present. He's still he's still around, but nothing that gives him any kind of character depth.
He's just one of those characters. Like, I had no idea who he was. I mean, I had his figure, but I was like, who the hell is this character? Like, why is he here? Like, I just didn't understand. I didn't care too much. I mean, I never got to this level as a kid. I could never get this far into the game when I did play it. Never good enough. But it was just cool to me that it's different. Like with Gambit, I know you fight a machine that makes you fight each of the other characters and like clones them.
That's cool.
Yeah, and I don't remember what the other one is. I did it as Gambit, and I did it as, I think I picked Cyclops first by accident, and then I got rid of him because I was unhappy. But I can't remember like what his level was.
I don't think I used Psylocke or Beast like Cyclops. Like I did Wolverine. Wolverine, you have to like kind of climb up a wall, and there's like lasers going up either side, so you kind of have to like wait in the middle for the lasers to go by. And then the final boss is like there's a core in the middle, and there's a bunch of platforms spinning around, so you kind of have to like get on one and hit it, and also avoid lasers. It's kind of easy, but kind of annoying at the same time. Cyclops, I think I made the Exodus, but I couldn't beat him because I thought he was annoying because he would kind of just like hang in the air and just like come down, swoop you, and grab you up. And it's like, that's one thing I don't like about this game is a lot of attacks like that will like grab you, and it just takes too long for the animations to play out. So I don't think I made it to the final boss, but I think, I did Gambit and Wolverine because I can only beat Magneto with Wolverine.
The Magneto fight is super fun. I really, really enjoyed that. I thought it's a little out of nowhere that Magneto's just involved in general, but I mean, such is the state of X-Men media. But I really, really enjoyed that fight. It was a little tough, but it was good.
What I like about it was like, it's annoying. Like that, like I had to basically do like a hit and run strategy with Wolverine. Like Magneto kind of has a shield and floats around the arena, and then like he'll grab a bunch of girders and throw them at you. So like he would gather the girders, and I would kind of get ready to do like the claw dash, and it would kind of like clip through that, and then I would just hit him, like I would do like a tiny bit of damage, and then just retreat into the corner, and that's how I did it.
I did it using Beast because you can jump on one of the girders, and as they fly at you, you kind of keep jumping on them. Oh. And again, it just cheeses the game. It really does. Like as much as I don't like Beast as a character, like he makes this game a whole lot easier.
I just hate this Magneto fight because he's invincible so much, and I didn't know this until this playthrough. He has an attack that kills you in one hit, no matter what.
That's
even
BS.
If you have a cheat code in for infinite health because you're frustrated, he still kills you in one hit. By the way.
But what is interesting, though, is, like, if you get to him as, like, Gambit and do, like, bring him to an inch of his death and then die and then do someone else, when you reach Magneto, like, he'll still be within an inch of his death.
That's pretty good.
He doesn't regain life in between deaths. Like, so the game kind of expects you to use up multiple characters that you've been getting life throughout the game to take out Magneto. So, I mean, that is nice that it's there, because this fight is hard as hell and stupid. It's a really bad final boss fight in my opinion, or just boss fight in general. I really don't like it.
It's just so out of nowhere for me. Like, had Magneto been involved maybe in the beginning or something, like if he showed up at the beginning and there was a reason for him existing, but it just kind of comes out of nowhere that he's just like showing up and like, hey, I'm going to destroy Genosha now. Bye-bye. It just seems weird.
But like you said, it's the 90s.
Yeah, like he's got to be included. I feel like every X-Men game, I mean, he's going to be involved somewhere, but just, I don't know, as the ultimate climax, I felt like the climax of the actual game itself is beating Apocalypse. Like, that's the whole thing, and then it's just, oh, nope, go beat Magneto now.
It kind of throws me off a little bit. Like, I mean, for me, as a kid, I didn't realize it. Now I'm looking back at it, I'm like, yeah, I mean, the game is called Age of Apocalypse. Like, why not just have Apocalypse be the villain?
Yeah, he's on the cover. His name is in the title, and it's just like, I guess it's a surprise where it's like, oh, you're done, but not really, because here's like these other bosses, even though they're just kind of danger room simulations. And like, I mean, Magneto is just like, he's the force, like, even for people, because like the X-Men for me mostly was through cartoons and video games. So like Magneto, him being there was thus not something I really batted an eyelash at.
It's something that I've grown to really appreciate in games, is like games that know proper pacing and when to end. Obviously, this is a pretty short game in general, but it really should have ended. And there's probably, I don't know, should have been more beefed in the middle to ultimately get to Apocalypse and being at the end. But I don't know. It felt so tacked on, almost like a teaser for a next game or something. Not my favorite.
Well, it's almost like, too, where for a game based on a comic book and one of the most popular animated series of all time, like the storytelling is pretty clumsy. Like, there's a setup at the beginning which most people just skip, where it's just like, okay, these people are being held hostage at Genosha, we have to go do something about it. And then Apocalypse is like, okay, I'm going to use these people and maybe the X-Men will be my new acolytes when you beat him. And then Magneto is like, oh no, I'm going to take these guys. And it's all very like jumbled. It doesn't really gel together. It's just like things are in there, but they're not really put in cohesively. It's just there because, okay, we have this license in these characters, and like they have context for like a Omega Red and Juggernaut where they're just like simulations, but like they could have been like part of the plot, or like Apocalypse's Horsemen or something, even though they weren't in the comics, just for the sake of this game.
I mean, something more would have been cool.
But I mean,
something
like
more that
too
relates to the plot in general.
Yeah.
I agree. I mean, and far be it for me to like say that this like beat 'em up game from the 90s needs to have like an airtight plot. Like, I'm not going that far, but like at the bare minimum, I would just like it to make sense. And that's just part of the game that's just like, it didn't really make sense. But and that's fine. Like, it didn't take away from my overall enjoyment of the game, but it just was like very much felt out of place.
The only thing I wish this game had is I wish it had Archangel, but that's because I'm a huge fan of Archangel.
I wish this game lets you play as so at the end of the game in the credits roll, you rescue the other team of X-Men. What I wish this game had is that after you do that and beat it, you get to play as other X-Men and get to play the game with them. Like, that would have been great.
I guess the thing about it is like the levels weren't designed really for flying.
Yeah.
It's like you would have to kind of like make the entire levels to have like the cast they have is very much just like these are people who are on the ground, because you got a character who could fly like Storm or Rogue or Archangel. Like, you can pretty much just like hover over everyone and, you know, kind of just rain fire from above and not really deal with like any of the enemies on the ground.
That's true. I mean, and yeah, I mean, really, like 3 out of the 5 people who were rescued were all were flyers. I mean, you got Jubilee and Bishop in there as well, but yeah, you're right. It's not designed for flying in mind. As much as we want to say Wolverine is Knuckles, there really should not be a Tails person in this game.
Yeah. All right, any other things you want to say about this before we go on to questions, comments, and memories?
I mean, just in general, my thoughts is like pretty positive on this game. I'm glad I played it. For someone who had no nostalgia, like revisiting it as someone who's 32, like I had a good time.
I'm really glad that I found someone that had no experience with this game. So
I really want to play it with an arcade stick because I have the Marvel vs. Capcom arcade 1-up cabinet, and it has this game's kind of pseudo sequel, Marvel Superheroes and War of the Gems. And I played through that with an arcade stick, and it was surprisingly playable. So I'm just like really definitely curious to see what that game will be like, or this game will be like, if it would be any easier or harder with an arcade stick.
I have never played that game for some reason. Like I've started it, but never gotten far.
It's essentially, it's this, only the way the game is designed is that it has 5 levels and then like an interlude and then more levels, but unlike this, where it's like, okay, this is the Psylocke level, this is the Beast level, etc. It's like you can use any character for any level. So it's like, oh, if you want to use Spider-Man here, you can, and you can climb up here. But if you use Hulk, like you kind of have to brute force your way through all these enemies.
It's on my list to one day finally play this game, but we'll see. I just don't know. But it's always been on my list. All right, and to go to questions, comments, I got a few. First from the I Watched the Entire Overload Super Replay group from AJ Gonzalez. I remember this game was hard. Like, it looked like a super fun brawl time, but right off the bat, it was difficult no matter who you picked to start off with. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
From Bruno Marchland, loved this game. Pretty much the best X-Men game of the 16-bit era. The special moves are even easy to figure out if you played stuff like Street Fighter 2. I mean, what else do you have in this era? What, X-Men for Genesis? You had Spider-Man X-Men, which is garbage.
Well, you had Uncanny X-Men for Nintendo, which is best not spoken of. There was X-Men 1 and 2 on Genesis. There was 1 or 2 Game Gear games.
2.
There was X-Men 2 Fall of the Mutants on PC and another X-Men game on PC. I can't remember its name. And Madness and Murder World. And then there was Arcade's Revenge in its various incarnations.
Are they bad?
It's surprisingly interesting because I have, like Spider-Man the X-Men, I have all the versions. Like I have the Game Gear game, the Super Nintendo game, the Genesis game, and the Game Gear game and Game Boy. And they're all a little different.
Are any good, though?
Some are easier than others, but none are great.
Okay. So, I mean, this is what, so you look at the time, this is probably one of the best. This is the best of the era, I think. What I played, at least, so far, the 16-bit era. X-Men 2 came out the year after this, too, for Clone Wars.
Yeah.
And from Steve Lucider, this was a solidly legit game. It looked great, played smoothly, and offered exactly the right amount of fan service. I agree with that.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
I got a lot of comments from this group, from the official Laser Time community. I can't read them all, but I'll read some. Chad Hembrock. I really enjoyed this game, and Spider-Man and X-Men Arcade Revenge. Played the hell out of those as a kid. How did you enjoy Spider-Man and the X-Men? I got nothing.
If he likes that game, he's going to be very disappointed in the discussion.
Oh.
Because it's one of those things, like, for example, like, when I was a kid, I don't know why, but, like, I never saw the James Bond Jr. cartoon show, but I had the toys, and I got the Super Nintendo game, and it wasn't great, but, like, I have fond memories of James Bond Jr. because I had it. So if you were a person who like got Spider-Man the X-Men for Christmas or a birthday present, or like you just saw an ad in a magazine, you're like, whoa, there's Spider-Man and the X-Men, and then just bought it, and it was all you had. Like,
so you're forced.
Yeah, it's like Stockholm Syndrome. You're just like, or maybe not that, but just
I don't know.
Convince yourself it's good. Yeah.
All right, and then from Rob McDowell, talked about this game in the last Podokin episode. I played the hell out of it. It was part of a 3-game licensing deal between Capcom and Marvel that they signed after releasing The Punisher. The other 2 games are X-Men Children of the Atom and Marvel Superheroes. This one had some great character-specific environment that highlighted their powers, like Wolverine climbing walls with his claws. Yeah. From Jason Flint, I own 2 copies of this game, as the first copy I got didn't work from a rental store. I really didn't like that the mutant powers were a combination of buttons a la Street Fighter, so I pretty much only played the practice mode where they were a single button press, but your progress was halted before the end. I hated that in games back then, when they would do that.
Yeah.
You play it on easy and you can't play the whole game.
Yes, I have like the Punisher on Sega Genesis, and it's just like, if you put on easy, you get to like level 3 or 4, and the Kingpin's like, well, if you want to beat me, we'll play on normal.
Ooh.
It's a good game, from what I remember. From Lee Hall, wore this card out growing up. Amazing this was the beat 'em up with the Street Fighter inputs added, not say a Final Fight sequel. Final Fight 3 did have button presses, by the way. For those that don't know, Greg Moore always wanted to play this. That first Genesis was a real bad time. From Josh Shoop. Oh, Lord, played the hell out of this game growing up. My dad, brother, and I would race to see who could beat it the fastest. And
this is a game that you can really race through and probably finish in less than an hour.
Yeah, if you can beat it, yeah. And from Trey Johnson, I played the shit out of this. I still rock to the soundtrack. It's so good.
That is true. It's not something I really got into. It's true of many Capcom games of this era where you could buy. If you could get a soundtrack of it over here, I like to have it.
Yeah.
I don't know if the soundtrack was ever released for this. I'm assuming not because of
Probably
the era.
Not.
But.
In Japan, maybe. I bought a soundtrack to Marvel Superheroes on CD before Christmas from eBay, so you never know.
Oh, yeah. A lot of stuff was released over time, just didn't come to America a lot of times.
Yeah.
I do have soundtracks from Japan. I have Final Fantasy VII soundtrack and Final Fantasy X-2 soundtrack somewhere.
Can I make a confession? Is something that in the I don't know, what are we phase 3, phase 4, the phase 4 Eternals level of the pandemic hobby I've gotten into is buying video game soundtracks on vinyl, and I would buy this soundtrack in a heartbeat if I could. I have spent way too much money that I'm not comfortable disclosing in public on all these video game vinyls, but Final Fantasy. I just got a Donkey Kong Country in yesterday. I would buy this soundtrack in a heartbeat, and a bunch of other games from the SNES era. I adored this soundtrack, and it's something that has made me pay attention to soundtracks and games as I play them now, because I used to play games and just put them on mute and listen to podcasts or watch a TV show while I'm playing. But I'm very cognizant of music now in games, and God, I was very on board for the music in this one.
I played it mostly mute, but
it's okay, Mike. I forgive you.
And from the Super Nintendo Supergroup, Shane Hoosman, great game, could only finish it with Wolverine. Oh, here's an interesting comment from Andre R. The music was made by the same guy who did the Mega Man X soundtrack.
Oh, that makes so much sense. God, talk about a soundtrack that fucking slaps. Mega Man X, let's go.
I should have did some more homework, because I've been something I'm really fascinated in is learning about the people who made these games back in the day, because so little knowledge is known, especially in Japan. There's every nugget of knowledge I can find about the Capcom licensed games. I soak up, because I just love Marvel vs. Capcom is one of my favorite games of all time. But there was someone at Capcom who was they called him the Marvel guy or something. He was the one who pushed for this big Marvel initiative to get all these licenses. And I would love to learn about how this game was made, who made the soundtrack, what the process was but you get that stuff Mario, but people probably there's not enough clamoring for a licensed game from 1994. They would do a big deep dive unless I learned Japanese or something and had a lot of money.
And from Felix Salberry, the input commands for each character are fluid and help mix up the beating of them up. You feel like Wolverine charging through and cutting down your enemies, or Cyclops Optic Blast. Just got to time it right. Such a fun pick up and play. And then from the last group I have, the official group, just because we love the X-Men, I got one comment from Derek Davis. The music gets to me. Awesome soundtrack for an SNES game.
Completely agree.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And that would bring us to our last segment, Shelf Stack or Box. And Jake, why don't you go first?
I think I'm going to put this one on the stack. It's not something I'm going to put and look at all the time. If we're just talking game box art, I think the cover art is great enough that it could go on the shelf. But I think it's just going to go on the stack. Totally worth playing. Well worth, again, if you're good at these kinds of games, an hour of your time, or me, it was a couple hours. But yeah, totally worth playing. I would love for this to get this and games of its ilk on the Switch or an eShop, which I realize is probably never going to happen.
No.
But I would love a more modern take on these kinds of games. I wish Disney would go to an indie studio that makes these kinds of games and ask them to make one in the modern, and it doesn't have to be a long game, 3-4 hours, less than that maybe, and in a more modern system, sell it for $15. I feel like people would be all about that.
Oh yeah, it would sell. I think.
Yeah, as you have Shredder's Revenge last year, and that trailer came out of nowhere, and even Neil Druckmann and a bunch of people from Naughty Dog and everyone was I can't believe they're making this new Turtles game. So Like, someone from Marvel had to see that and be like, we have to go and make like an X-Men game and as like, or a Spider-Man game. And like, as far as this being re-released, like, I don't really know because like I would say like the ROM is lost, but like it's on the arcade 1-up machines and all of those, yeah, like all those games are. And like, so Capcom is like somehow someone is figuring out like the licenses to re-release these things legally. As I know, like it's kind of in this era where it's like X-Men and Children of the Atom and Marvel vs. Capcom and X-Men vs. Street Fighter. There's like Maximilian Dude, who's like a big fighting game personality. Like he started a hashtag last year, free MVC2, to get MVC2 re-released. And then Mike Micah, who is at Digital Eclipse, like kind of did an interview where he said like they're having talks now to possibly get something like that happening. And when you look at say like the Star Wars things that are happening, so you have like Limited Run is putting out like Shadows of the Empire and Star Wars and Empire Strikes Back, and I guess those were all done by LucasArts, so it's less tracking down licenses and things. But I mean, it could happen. I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility. You just need to have someone who's like a big champion for it. Because I think right now Marvel's big focus is like we don't care about in the games section, it's like we don't care about the past because like every game they've had, except maybe for like Avengers, has been like this prestige release. Like you got like Miles Morales and Spider-Man and Guardians of the Galaxy.
Notable release, the Avengers game.
Yeah.
I want to play that so bad. I own it. I just don't have time.
Just play the story. Don't worry about all the fluff. Just play like the main campaign isn't long, and just play like the 2 Hawkeyes and Black Panther, and just put it away.
That's all I want to do.
I
wouldn't do any of the grinding. I don't have time for that or care. I have enough games to play. But yeah, it's on my list. I have it sitting in front of my PS4. I just have yet to bother to sit down and try to play it. But that's because podcast. So. All right, and what about you, Blair? Shelf, stack, or box?
Oh, I would definitely put this on the shelf. Like, I take this down. Like, I have a copy. I played this on my Retron 5, so I played it somewhat legitimately. I just played it on a clone system. Because I always find an excuse to take down this game and play it. Like, I was so happy that I got to do this show because it just gave me an excuse to just go play Mutant Apocalypse for, like, a night. Because my favorite Marvel games are the Capcom series, like, from this up until MVC2 and even 3 and Infinite. Like, there's something about them, like how they look, how they sound, like the crunch of like the punches and like just dashing through people as Wolverine. That's just like, it feels and sounds so good. And yeah, I mean, it's not terribly long, but I don't think it needs to be. Like, it's as long as it needs to be without overstaying its welcome.
I can agree with that. And yeah, I'll go last. I'm also going to put this on the shelf. I mean, I enjoy this game. It's something that it also means a lot to me nostalgic-wise because I played it a lot as a kid and I was never good at it. It wasn't until I think a couple years ago before the podcast I actually beat it for the first time where I used save states and finally finished it. But it's just one of those games that's always meant so much to me. And it has also been meant to be on the show for a long time. I just never did it. I kept changing it out, but it's been on my list to put on the show for years since the show started. So I'm so glad we got to finally cover it. So yeah, going on the shelf, and I'm glad it exists. And Blair, where can people find you at?
You can find my work at comicbookvideogames.com. There's a link at the top that has a review games index, and I'm sure this is down there somewhere. I think I reviewed this along with a bunch of other Apocalypse themes games when X-Men Apocalypse came out a few years ago. You can find me on Twitter at Blarcade, and you can also check out Comic Book Video Games on Facebook as well, where I post like pictures of like, say, the 2 Gotham Knights figures I just bought on Friday.
Okay. Oh, and the last thing I do want to say, for some stupid reason, at some point, I want to cover in a mini episode X-Men Reign of Apocalypse for Game Boy Advance.
I have it. I have the strategy guide.
Which, it looks awful, and someday I want to play it and do a mini on it, just because X-Men.
I love it.
And if you do want to hear more X-Men, we got there's not a lot of X-Men, but there's a few X-Men episodes for you to listen to once I pull it up.
Oh my God, you really weren't kidding about how bad this game looks. Oh
no, watch it. Look up Rogue. Yeah. Look up the way Rogue walks.
Y'all,
So,
go Google this. When
X-Men
you're
Days
listening
of
to this
Future
episode-
Past, Comic 29, X-Men Night of the Sentinels, Pilot Test 1, X-Men Destiny, Episode 124, X-Men God Loves, Man Kills, Comic 21, X-Men vs. Arcade, Comic 7, where we covered the brief where they fight Arcade and the early stuff. Yeah, that story arc. So definitely go check all that out. And I should talk about what we're going to talk about next week. Next week, we are finally finishing BioShock. We are covering BioShock Infinite, finally. Going to finally play that game. I'm enjoying it. Not as much as I thought I would, but I'm enjoying it.
It's good. I still think the first one is my all-time favorite of that series, but God, what a great series.
Yes, it still holds up. And I think that's... Oh, and please follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and on YouTube. If you want to support the show, we have a Patreon. For as little as $1, you can go vote in our Patreon poll that we have each month. Right now, it is for Spider-Man. Well, actually, when this came out, I don't know what the poll will be, because I think the poll will have... Nope, you still have a couple days to vote in the Spider poll. And right now, Amazing Spider-Man and Venom are winning. So you get to choose what we're going to cover. So definitely go check that out. For as little as $1, you can go vote. And I want to give a shout out to my awesome intro and outro, courtesy of Helena at Hell Hasphere. You can follow her on TikTok. She made our music. I want to give a shout out to my buddy Bill Tucker, who did all the MCU movies. And we covered all of that insanity. He started his own podcast, The Gamer Looks at 40. So definitely go check him out. And I think that's everything I need to say. So we will see you guys all next time. Bye, everybody.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.